The phone rang at 7 in the morning, shattering the quiet of my kitchen. I was making coffee, watching the sunrise through my window, enjoying the peace of my small apartment. When I saw my brother's name on the screen, my stomach tightened. We hadn't spoken in 3 years. Not since the day our mother threw me out of her house and told me never to come back begging. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "What do you want, Damien?" I asked, my voice flat and cold. There was a pause on the other end. Then his voice came through, not soft or apologetic, but demanding. Like I owed him something. Like I had been waiting by the phone for years just hoping he would call. "Mother is dying," he said. No greeting. No "how are you?" Just those 3 words. "She's very sick. Cancer. Stage 4. The doctors say she has maybe 3 months left. She's asking for you. She wants to see you." I stood there frozen, the phone pressed against my feeling my chest tighten. Not with sadness. Not with grief or worry or the kind of emotion a daughter should feel hearing her mother is dying, but with something darker. Something cold and hard that had been building inside me for 27 years. Because the last time I stood in front of my family, they had thrown me out like I was garbage. Like I was nothing. Like I had never mattered at all. And now, suddenly, they needed me. I hung up without answering. Without saying yes or no, "I'll think about it." I just ended the call and set my phone down on the counter with shaking hands. For a long time, I just stood there, staring at nothing, feeling memories I had buried for years start clawing their way back to the surface. Memories of the first time my mother abandoned me. And I could still remember that day as clearly as if it had happened yesterday instead of 21 years ago. I had been 6 years old. My mother had packed a small suitcase with my clothes, taken my hand, and walked me to a house 3 streets away from where we lived. A couple I had never met before opened the door. The woman smiled at me, but her eyes were sad. Like she felt sorry for me. My mother knelt down and looked me in the face. I remembered thinking she looked tired. Worn out. Like I was a burden she couldn't carry anymore. "You're going to stay here for a while," she said. "Just temporarily. Until I get things sorted out. Be good. Listen to what they tell you. I'll come back for you soon." She kissed my forehead. Then she left. I watched her walk away down the street, getting smaller and smaller until she turned the corner and disappeared completely. I waited by that window every single day for weeks, watching for her to come back. She never did. The house I grew up in was quiet, cold, and careful. The couple who took me in, Mr. and Mrs. Harlow, were not cruel people. They fed me. They clothed me. They sent me to school and made sure I did my homework. But they never loved me. I was a responsibility to them, not a daughter. A favor they were doing for someone else. An obligation they fulfilled but never embraced. I slept in a small bedroom at the back of the house. Every night I stayed at the ceiling in the dark, whispering the same question over and over like a prayer. Why didn't my mother want me? What did I do wrong? When is she coming back? Mrs. Harlow would tell me sometimes that my mother was getting her life together, that she was working hard, that she wanted me back but needed time. I believed those lies for years. Then one day, when I was 12 years old, everything changed. Mrs. Harlow sat me down at the kitchen table with a serious expression. "Your mother wants to see you," she said. "She's ready for you to come home now. She has a house and a job and everything is stable. You'll be moving back with her next week." I remembered feeling so happy I thought my heart would explode. 6 years of waiting was finally over. My mother wanted me back. She had come for me just like she promised. I had no idea that going back to her would be worse than being abandoned in the first place. The first time I stepped into my mother's house, I saw him. My brother Damien. He was 7 years old, just a year younger than me. But the way my mother looked at him, touched him, spoke to him made it clear he wasn't just her son. He was her favorite. Her precious child. The one she had kept while she gave me away. She held his hand the way she had never held mine. Her voice when she spoke to him was soft and warm, full of pride and affection. Her eyes shined when she looked at him, like he was the most wonderful thing she had ever created. I had waited 6 years for that look. 6 years of lying awake wondering what was wrong with me, why I wasn't good enough, when my mother would finally love me. And she gave that look to him without even thinking about it. That was the moment I realized something that hurt worse than abandonment. My mother was capable of love. She knew how to be affectionate and proud and warm. She just didn't have any of those feelings for me. And soon, she made that painfully, brutally clear. It started with small things. Details I noticed but tried to ignore because I wanted so desperately to believe she had changed. That she wanted me back because she loved me. Damien ate first at dinner. He got the biggest portions, the best pieces of meat, the fresh fruit while I got whatever was left. Damien got new clothes for school. I got hand-me-downs from neighbors and charity shops. When Damien made mistakes, broke things, got bad grades, our mother would sigh and say boys will be boys. When I made the smallest error, I was punished, sent to my room, made to do extra chores, lectured about being more responsible. One night, about 3 months after I moved back, my mother had friends over for dinner. I was helping serve food while Damien sat at the table like a guest. One of her friends asked about me, and my mother laughed. Actually laughed. "Oh, she's always been difficult," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "I don't know where she got it from. Some children are just born stubborn and complicated." Her friends laughed along with her. Like it was funny. Like I wasn't standing right there hearing every word. I stood frozen holding a serving dish, staring at my plate, feeling completely invisible. That night I cried quietly into my pillow, realizing I had come back to a house that didn't want me. But I had nowhere else to go. And things were about to get so much worse. My brother didn't just ignore me. He actively hated me. I could see it in his eyes every time he looked at me. Resentment. Anger. Like my very existence was an insult to him. He called me names when our mother wasn't listening. Stupid. Ugly. Unwanted. He hid my school supplies so I would get in trouble for not having homework. He broke my things and blamed me for being careless. He told lies about me constantly. One evening when I was 14, Damien shoved me hard enough that I crashed into the dining room table. I hit the edge with my hip and the pain was so sharp I cried out. When I told my mother what happened, she didn't ask if I was hurt. She didn't check for bruises or offer comfort. She just looked at me with tired annoyance and said, "Stop provoking him. You know he has a temper. Why do you always have to cause problems?" That was the day I stopped expecting fairness. Stopped hoping my mother would protect me or choose me or see me as anything other than a burden she regretted taking back. And I started planning my escape, because I knew if I stayed in that house much longer, it would destroy me completely. I worked quietly through high school. I studied hard, kept my head down, and saved every penny I could earn from babysitting and part-time jobs. I learned that survival meant silence, that speaking up only brought punishment, that the safest thing was to be invisible until I could leave. When I was 21, I met Thomas. He was kind and steady, and he saw me in ways my family never had. When he asked me to marry him after a year of dating, I said yes immediately. Not just because I loved him, though I did, but because marriage meant freedom. It meant a door opening to a life that didn't include my mother's cold disapproval and my brother's cruelty. The day I moved out of my mother's house to marry Thomas, she didn't cry. She didn't hug me or tell me she would miss me or offer any motherly advice. She just stood in the doorway with her arms crossed and said, "Don't come back asking for money when this doesn't work out. I've done enough for you already." I should have heard the warning hidden in those words. Should have understood that even when I left, she still saw me as someone who took from her instead of someone she had failed. But I was too happy to be free to care what she thought anymore. For the first few years of my marriage, I still tried to be a daughter. I still hoped that maybe distance would improve our relationship. That maybe my mother would see me differently now. That I was an adult building my own life. I sent her money when she mentioned bills were tight. I paid for repairs on her house when things broke. I answered her calls and visited on holidays and tried to maintain some connection to the family I had come from. Not because she deserved it, but because somewhere deep inside, I still hoped that one day she might love me. That one day she might look at me the way she looked at Damien. With pride. With affection. With something other than disappointment. I didn't realize I was only feeding her sense of entitlement, making her believe she had the right to take from me without ever giving anything back. And then my life began to fall apart in ways I couldn't control. Ways that would finally show me exactly who my family really was. Thomas's construction business began to fail when I was 25. The economy crashed and contracts dried up. Companies that owed him money went bankrupt. Within 6 months, we went from comfortable to desperate. Bills piled up faster than we could pay them. Our savings disappeared. We sold our car and started taking the bus. We moved from our apartment to a smaller, cheaper place in a worse neighborhood. For the first time in my adult life, I needed help. Real help. The kind I had given my mother dozens of times over the years without hesitation. And against every instinct screaming at me not to, I called her. I should have known better. I should have remembered who she was. But desperation makes you hope for things you know won't happen. I drove to her house on a Saturday afternoon. Damien was there visiting. He was 26 now. Still living off our mother. Still acting like the world owed him everything. I stood in her living room and explained everything. How Thomas's business had collapsed. How we were struggling. How we just needed help getting through the next few months until things stabilized. My voice was shaking. I hated asking. Hated admitting I needed anything from her. But I had nowhere else to turn. My brother laughed. Actually laughed out loud like I had told the funniest joke he had ever heard. "You married a loser who can't even keep a business running," he said, smirking at me with pure contempt. "And now you want Mom to bail you out? That's perfect. That's exactly what I expected from you." I looked at my mother, waiting for her to defend me, to tell Damien to shut up, to show even the smallest amount of compassion or understanding. She looked at me with disgust, like I had confirmed every negative thing she had ever thought about me. "You chose your life," she said coldly. "You chose to marry that man. You chose to leave this house and go off on your own. Now you want to come back begging for help? Deal with the consequences of your choices. I'm not responsible for fixing your mistakes." Her words hit me like physical blows. "I helped you," I said, my voice breaking. "I sent you money. I paid your bills. I helped you dozens of times and never asked for anything back." "That was your choice," she said. "I never asked you to do those things. And now you think I owe you something? That's not how the world works. You made your bed. Sleep in it." Then she told me to leave. Not just leave the conversation. Leave her house. And never come back begging again. I drove home in a daze. When Thomas asked what happened, I couldn't even speak. I just cried. Cried for the little girl who had waited by the window for a mother who never came back. Cried for the teenager who had tried so hard to earn love that was never going to be given. Cried for the woman who had finally learned that some people are incapable of love no matter how much you deserve it. That was the moment something inside me died. The part that still hoped. The part that still tried. The part that still wanted my mother to see me as worthy. It died completely and I never called her again. Months passed. Then a year. Then 2. Then 3. I built my life quietly without them. Thomas's business slowly recovered. We moved to a better apartment. We started saving again. And I realized something surprising. Without my mother and brother in my life, I felt peaceful. Lighter. Free from the constant weight of trying to earn love from people who would never give it until 3 years later, when my phone rang and my brother's voice demanded I come back. After I hung up on Damien that morning, the calls didn't stop. First Damien called back 5 times. I didn't answer. Then my mother's number appeared. I blocked it. Then relatives I hadn't heard from in years started calling. Aunts and uncles and cousins who had never cared about me before suddenly had very strong opinions about what I should do. "She's still your mother," my aunt said when I finally answered one call. "You only get one mother. You'll regret this if you don't see her before she dies." "Where were you when she threw me out?" I asked. "Where were you when I was 6 years old and she gave me away? Where were you when I needed help and she laughed in my face?" My aunt had no answer for that. "You need to be the bigger person," she said finally. "Forgive her. Show her grace. That's what family does." I hung up because I realized something important. People only preach forgiveness when they weren't the ones who got hurt, when they didn't live through the pain, when it cost them nothing to be generous with someone else's suffering. A week after the first call, A distant cousin I barely knew called me with information I hadn't asked for. "You should know what's really going on," she said. "Damien has been spending your mother's money for years. Recklessly. Gambling debts. Bad investments. Expensive trips and parties. She's broke. The medical bills are crushing her. And he's not taking care of her. He's just waiting for her to die so he can sell the house." And suddenly everything made sense. They didn't want me back because my mother had changed. They wanted me back because I was useful. Because they needed money and care and someone to clean up the mess Damien had made. I wasn't a daughter to them. I was a solution to a problem. A free nurse. A source of money. Something to be used until they didn't need me anymore. Then discarded again. 2 weeks after that first call, I decided to visit her. Not because I forgave her. Not because I wanted a relationship. But because I needed closure. I needed to look her in the eyes one final time and know that I had made the right choice by walking away. I drove to her house on a cold Tuesday afternoon. Damien answered the door looking exhausted and resentful. "Finally," he said. "Took you long enough." I ignored him and walked to her bedroom. She was lying in bed, much smaller than I remembered. Weaker. Her skin was gray and her eyes were sunken. She looked like she was disappearing. When she saw me, her face changed. For the first time in my entire life, she looked at me the way I had always wanted. With need. With desperation. With something that looked almost like love. But it was too late. Far too late. "You came," she whispered, reaching out her hand toward me. I didn't take it. I just stood there at the foot of her bed, looking at this woman who had shaped my entire life through her absence and cruelty. "I'm sorry," she said, tears sliding down her face. "I'm so sorry for everything. I was a terrible mother. I abandoned you. I chose your brother over you. I treated you like you didn't matter. I was wrong. So wrong. Please forgive me. Please stay and help me. I need you. I love you." Words I had waited my entire childhood to hear. Words that would have changed my life if she had said them when I was 6, or 12, or 14, or even 25. But now, spoken at the edge of death because she needed something from me, they meant nothing. I felt nothing hearing them. No warmth. No forgiveness. No softening. Just emptiness where those feelings used to live. Because apologies spoken when you're dying don't erase a lifetime of calculated cruelty and deliberate rejection. She asked me to stay. To move back in and take care of her. To pay her medical bills. To fix everything Damien had broken. To save her. I stood there silent for a long moment, remembering the days she threw me out of this same house. The days she chose my brother's cruel lies over my truth. The 6 years I spent as a child wondering why I wasn't good enough to keep. And I said one sentence. "I needed you once too." Then I walked out. I walked past Damien, who tried to grab my arm and demand I come back. I walked out the front door and got in my car. And I drove away from that house for the last time. My family called me heartless, cruel, ungrateful, cold, every name they could think of to make me feel guilty for refusing to sacrifice myself for a woman who had never sacrificed anything for me. I blocked every number. I even changed my phone number and didn't give them the new one. I blocked them on social media. I avoided places where I might run into them. I erased them from my life as completely as they had tried to erase me. I chose myself. Finally. After 27 years of trying to earn love from people who had none to give, I chose my own peace over their demands. I chose freedom over obligation. I chose to live a life where the people who hurt me no longer had access to hurt me again. 4 months later, I heard through a mutual acquaintance that my mother had died. I didn't cry. I sat quietly in my apartment, looking out the window at the city, feeling something I had never felt before. Relief. Not happiness or satisfaction or revenge. Just relief. Because it was finally, truly over. The hoping was over. The trying was over. The pain was over. And I realized something I had never understood before. Revenge isn't always loud or dramatic or visible. Sometimes the loudest revenge is simply living well. Building a good life. Being happy with people who actually love you. Existing peacefully without the people who tried to destroy you. That was the day I finally felt completely free. Free from the little girl who waited by the window. Free from the teenager who tried so hard to be good enough. Free from the woman who kept hoping her mother would change. I was just me, whole and complete on my own. And that was enough. If you've made it this far in our story, thank you for listening. If this resonated with you, if you've ever had to stand up to toxic family members or protect yourself from those who should have loved you, please share this video. Leave a comment about your own experience because you are not alone in this fight. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more stories about real people standing up to injustice, finding their strength, and learning that sometimes the best family is the one you choose, not the one you're born into. Remember, you deserve to be treated with dignity, love, and respect.